Tommy, it's that time of week where we got to talk some betting. It's been pretty tricky for you boys last week. The multi didn't get up. I was watching very closely, but not to be, unfortunately. Before we get into some footy, though, any horses of yours running around this weekend?
No, we don't. We had a couple go around last week, which would rather forget. We'll give them forget runs last week, Ryan. But I was on fire last week. I just didn't have my partner in crime. I went 2 from 2 in the multi, and Dylan went 0 from 2, and you were absent. So I missed you last week.
Look, Dylan's always consistent, isn't he? He's always struggled to pick his nose, as we'd say. Let's get into some footy. We've got a couple of teams I'm pretty keen to talk about this week. Starting with the GWS Giants, 3 losses from their last 5 games. Pretty poor on the weekend against the Bombers, particularly in that second half. Failed to respond to the Bombers' ball movement and just didn't really adjust mid-game at all. Been some question marks over their depth over the last couple of weeks as well. But somehow, still $6 in the premiership market, second elect to the Sydney Swans. This week, they've got the Dogs at the Showground. The other side I want to talk about is Fremantle, a bit of a favourite team of ours over the last 10 weeks or so. We've been hot and cold on them. Another low-scoring hit-out and a pretty emotional game for them against the Swans last week at home, just the 39 points. And look, the Dockers did do plenty right, I thought, but just didn't capitalise on their chances. So, simple question here for you, mate. Which of these 2 teams should we forgive, and or did we get it wrong?
I think the Giants, they just need to play consistent 4 quarters. They've got their best footy's good enough, and they were scintillating against the Brisbane Lions only a few weeks ago. So I think their best is still good enough. What they're having is fade-outs in games where they're just not scoring and not capitalising and letting opposition teams do what they want to them. So I think the Giants will still be thereabouts. This is a danger game, though, for them. I think the Western Bulldogs, the way they played last week, huge challenge for them, and we know that the tussles that those 2 teams have had over the years. So they're really short, the Giants, in betting market. So I think the money there would be on the Dogs just for an upset, just for the value of that. But I think the Giants are going to be there. I think they're still a top 4 team. Fremantle, well, the pre-season I thought they were going to drop right away. So they've probably surprised me a little bit throughout the season. Friday night has to be a forgive for what they would have been going through internally and the 24 hours they had. Had they kicked straight in that game, they would have been right in it against a premiership favourite. I think Sydney are the clear number 1 top seed in the competition at the moment. So had they taken their opportunities, they could have been a lot closer. You said it was a low scoring, but I think at one point Sydney were 11-1 and Fremantle were 1-11. So the biggest factor and pressure in footy is always scoreboard pressure. It's so underrated, doesn't get spoken about enough, but you've got to kick well in front of goals, and Fremantle weren't able to do that. So, yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't think Fremantle will play finals, but I think the Giants top 4 and Fremantle will just miss out.
You took the words right out of my mouth, mate. I was about to ask you if you were willing to, maybe you'd come around on Freo to lock them into a top 8 spot, but it sounds like you haven't. Another team that's sort of on the fringe of the finals is the Gold Coast Suns. Playing their second game up in Darwin on Thursday night. They're home away from home. I think they're going for something like their 6th straight win at TO Stadium. They've got the Cats on a quick turnaround. Fancy a team named the Suns, relishing the hot conditions up there in Darwin. But we saw the Suns enter a real purple patch this time last year, where they rattled off some wins up in Darwin and then fell away in the second half of the season. Cats have some big outs: Jezza Cameron, Tommy Hawkins, Patrick Dangerfield. But we're still getting $2.15 about the Gold Coast Suns. Are you willing to steer the punters into that one?
No, I don't think so. They took on North Melbourne on the weekend, and they were lucky they played North Melbourne for a large chunk of that until sort of the second half, late in that third quarter, where they got momentum. If they play the way they played on the weekend, just continually bomb it in, and their key forwards play from behind, the Gold Coast Suns, Geelong will have an absolute field day and just play their brand of footy, which is the rebound, intercept, mark, transition off that. So if the Gold Coast continue to play the way they did on the weekend, which they've done most of the season, bomb it to their key forwards and hope to out-wrestle and manoeuvre, Geelong defenders will have an absolute field day on Thursday night. So they need to come up with a different method, start to lower their eyes, work on their offensive side of the game. If they get that right, start to lower their eyes, use the hit-ups, they're a chance to win that game of footy. But if they play the way they have most of the season, I think Geelong will get hold of them.
Does feel like we're yet to see the Suns play a full 4 quarters. I do think the glass is half full there on the Gold Coast, but I agree with you. The Cats set up so well behind the ball. This is going to be a really big challenge for them. The other game we do have to talk about is the top 8 blockbuster. Friday night at the SCG, Swans taking on the Blues. Rematch of last year's elimination final. That was an absolute thriller that I think we can both say the Swans probably felt like they should have won. They just didn't kick straight on the night. The Blues led from start to finish and were dominant, winning the contested possessions by a pretty clear margin in that game. Big win for Carlton last week as well. But this, to me, feels like the Swans' game to lose. Both sides are averaging around 14 goals a game, but the Swans have been one of the toughest teams to score against this year. Carlton currently ranks 5th in goals allowed to opponents on the other end. So how do you feel about this one playing out?
Yeah, match of the round, clear match of the round for me as well. Can't wait for Friday night. I think it sets up beautifully. I lean towards Sydney. I'm still not sold on Carlton. I think they're a little bit inconsistent as well, a bit like the Giants. We've seen what they did early against Melbourne, then they let them back into the game and they hold on right at the death by a point. I think Sydney are the best team in the competition. They've still got players to come back into that team as well. McCartan, Luke Parker, Mills as well. They're by far the number 1 seed for me. The way they play, the brand of footy, Isaac Heaney's in career best form, Goulden. They've just got the whole area, all areas of the ground covered at the moment, the Sydney Swans. The midfielders run, attack, they defend really strongly. The contested footy's good. So I'm probably leaning just towards Sydney, but I think it's going to be the match round. I think it'll be an absolute cracking contest up there on Friday night.
Blues haven't won at the SCG since 2019, so that's another stat that the punters should take note of. All right, we've got to get into the multi now. Very unlucky last week on a couple of legs. I'm not sure who had what here, but I'll just read through what you and Dill came up with. Swans head-to-head against Freo, that's a big tick. Either team 15.5 points or less in the Bombers and Giants game. Bit stiff there. I think the Bombers got up by 20. The Bont 25-plus disposals, your old favourite. And then Dill went pretty wide on a Richmond goal kicker that just didn't look likely at all. But, full credit to him for taking it on. So 2 out of 4 legs. We're still chasing our second win. And this week, you're sticking fat with the player markets. Who have you got?
Yeah, I'm going player market. So we're waiting till Saturday night, I think it is. The Brisbane Lions take on Richmond. I think Lachie Neale 30+ is really good value. I think he's been in good form and he'll feast on an undermanned Richmond at the moment, and then another Brownlow medalist and another former teammate of mine or former club, Ollie Wines against Hawthorn 25+. I think he was back to his absolute best last week, and I think he'll have 25.
Feels like the Brisbane midfield's back to its best. I am going to Swans 1-39, put my money where my mouth is. $2.15 for them against the Blues on Friday night. And I've also gone Collingwood 1-39 against the Crows. I think the last couple of encounters between these two sides have been decided by no more than a couple of points last year. So I think this one could be very close. So to recap, we've got Ollie Wines 25+ disposals, Lachie Neale 30+, Sydney 1-39, and the Pies 1-39. Look, we're going pretty big this week, Rocky. $14 for that multi.
Oh, can't wait. That's I think we're a big chance, Ryan, to get that over the line.
This is some of our best picking, I think. That multi is available in the special section on the Neds app. Good betting chat as always, Rocky. We'll do it all again next week.
See you next week, mate.